Hello everyone, this is the ChopStick CS3 version 1.1. I use the AMAX 1106 6300 kV motors with HQ 30x30 props, Beta FPV 12 amp all-in-one board, TBS Unify Pro 32 Nano, Luminaire Axie antenna, and the Caddx EOS 2. The arms come in two pieces. They're 2mm thick and just about 7mm wide. Bottom plate is also 2mm thick. Top plate is 1.5. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting 137mm. It weighs almost 77 grams, and I flew it on these GNB 550 milliamp 3S batteries. Full parts list in the video description below. You can also build it using a 20x20 stack or a 16x16 stack. It also comes with these 3D printed accessories, a battery strap, an extra camera mount, and antenna mount. So if you're not familiar with TomoQuads, the ChopStick is a frame or a frame name that he's been designing over the years. It used to be back in the early micro days we didn't have very decent cameras that we could put on these. So they used to have a lot of those all-in-one camera and VTXs, but now he's redesigning for those nano cameras like the RunCam Nano or the Caddx EOS 2. You can put either on here. My preference would have been that if I had it at the time I was flying this, I probably would have went with the RunCam, but most of you know that. I prefer the wider field of view, and I actually like the colors a little bit better, but we all have our own preferences, so you know this is a custom build, so you can pick pretty much whatever you want. After seeing the quick roll, you might have the first question is why that board and why those connectors? And I'll talk more about that later, but the basic genesis of it as I wanted to do some testing. Let's talk about the flight more. One of the things that caught me off guard about this was how it felt like I was flying something much heavier, actually. I kind of felt like, not necessarily in the racing style around, but when I would do punch outs over the house, I felt like I had more carry than I expected to. And this wasn't a particularly windy day or anything, so I didn't have any environmental aids on that carry. But it really felt like this, at this weight with a 3S battery, you got the power that you would want from, say, a 2.5-inch micro that had enough carry to throw over the house or do other things. But you also felt like you had the feathery maneuverability, and you could stop on a dime, or you could be extra agile, that maybe with a 2.5-inch that's more traditional, it's coming in around 90 grams, and then you add the battery and it's coming well over 100 grams, that you just might have to be more careful. I felt I could probably go faster with this one than I could a lot of my other micros that are running 2.5-inch props, because I had that extra lightweight. I had probably likely a higher power to weight ratio because the weight is quite down from the 2.5 inchers that I've been flying or that I have liked. So that was some of the differences in the flying. Also the flight time, you saw that I went through the quick roll and I used those HQ props again. Now I have done some further flying, and HQ props don't always work out on this size of motor. So I'm not going to necessarily have HQ props all the time, or I'll talk more about that because I've got another machine I've been flying as well, and I've been flip-flopping props and motors on, and I'm just not certain that you should necessarily fly these props on all your 1106 motors or 110X motors. So you're going to have to kind of choose wisely or choose carefully on what you choose to run this prop on, or if you go with a smaller prop or a different prop altogether. These props aren't necessarily heavy, they're just a little bit heavier than the typical gem fans that I run, the tri-blades. I think they're the 2540s, so they're only slightly heavier, but the efficiency went up, and that's why I changed to them, because I felt like the power was there, and if I put these on, my flight time went up. You can see right now that my battery voltage is already down below 3.5 volts per cell, but we're at 3 minutes, and you'll see that when I come in, I went a little bit too low. I did adjust my power settings, and I probably adjusted them too far. There it is. It's still climbing back up. We'll eventually get up to 3.4, which is still a little bit low, so maybe 10 seconds less than what you see on screen. One other thing that we need to talk about, just to clarify, is yes, I went with plugs. And I went with plugs because this is the first time I'm using this board or any of the new 12 amp boards that are coming out, and I was curious if the connectors are a bottleneck, and I believe they are to some degree. So I would encourage you, if you want to build one of these, to go ahead and snap off the plugs. Adam Baum's actually got a video on it. I watched part of it. Basically, the genesis of it, you just take your thumb and you make really small movements back and forth with the connector, and eventually the pins that are inside the connector will snap off. You can slide these connectors off, but you want to be pretty careful about that because you don't want to end up pulling a pin through by chance. So that's why snapping them off is probably the recommended route. You probably have other methods, but that was one I saw on Adam's page, so you can use that, or you can go over to Adam's site and use his technique. I wanted to keep the connectors on because I was curious about how it would handcuff the performance possibly. And surprisingly enough, I can't say it didn't hamper the performance. I suspect it did, but I was pretty happy with how it performed, so I really didn't feel ultra compelled to take the connector off. Now, for science purposes, I probably should have, or at least cut these and then rewired them up to the top, because I can do that too. These on the top side of these boards are closer together than they are if you snap the connectors off. They've got nice large pads on the bottom side underneath the connectors, so that's probably where you want to be optimally. Also, my connectors, they're really close to the edge, and I couldn't actually get them down through if you wanted to have it seat further down through the bottom plate. And I lean the connectors in. I don't know if you can see that in there, but I just put some pressure on each side of the connectors to kind of lean them in to get them in a position to where I could push them down through there. And it does leave me enough space to where I've got my USB connection is available to me as well. There's also some prints that come with this, one for your antenna mount, but I didn't use that because I wanted to stay lightweight. I wanted to stay agile and see if I could get as much flight time out of it as I could. I wasn't blown away by these motors. I can tell you that if you want to be blown away by some 1100 series motors, these Sunny Sky 1106 6000 or 6500 kV, let me see here. Yeah, 6500 kV. These motors have crazy performance, but they will drain your battery. The thrust and the pop that you get with these motors is really exciting, but unfortunately your battery feels the pain from these. But if you can tune them up properly, you'll have a lot of fun on these motors. And some people might not remember these motors because they came out about 1.5 years ago. They do have a tendency in crash to kind of separate from the base of the motor. They tend to just pull this. There doesn't seem to be enough material around here to where you end up with mangled bases when you do have a severe crash. There was also some wavy lines you might have noticed during some of that flight footage, especially when we come down from those punch outs and then you would kind of bottom out. I tried various things to try to remedy that. I tried moving the camera mounts around. I thought that might be too loose. I have a feeling it's just this camera. There's some slight vibrations as you're coming down. Maybe a slightly better tune will get rid of that. It didn't bother me that much, so I did work on it a little bit, but I wasn't going to allow that to stop me from flying and having fun. So you see my fun in the video. I'm using an iFlight strap. I didn't mention that in the quick roll, and I do have a bit of, oh my god, battery strap, or battery pad right here as well, and that gets me up off these screws, and that's why I use the thicker battery pad, is because you can see that base plate is down here. You could put the arms on top, you know, that would probably work, but then it's going to push everything up, and I kind of like having everything together. So it's really up to you how you want to mount these things. I put the arms on the bottom. I don't see any reason why you couldn't put the arms on the top, but I chose not to. There is a capacitor here at the back. Some of you might be curious about that. Let me see if I can find the readout. Looks like a 25 volt. How many microfarads is that? 330 microfarad, 25 volt capacitor. The last bit is that we do have a bit of motor protection out here, and you can see it's actually quite lengthy, and that gives it a simple ability that if you do have a crash where you hit something, as long as you're not at an extreme angle, you have the possibility that you'll have a little bit of motor protection depending upon, you know, what you're coming into. You know, once we get at extreme angles, the motors are going to take a hit, but that is out there, and I want to draw your attention to it because that is becoming more and more important, because I have frames that I've damaged some motors on, just bent shafts or bent bells to where they don't rotate freely anymore, that don't have any more motor protection out here on the carbon fiber, and I'm kind of starting to blame the frames I'm running on those. But so we have that here. But it flies pretty good. I enjoy it. I'll have a link down below to all the parts as well as TomoQuads website. I do have another TomoQuads that I'm working on. It's the CSX. It's basically the same, but it's going to come in lighter. At least my build is I'm trying to come in lighter and lighter and still run 1100 series motors and run different props. So I'm experimenting still, so that might be a week or two out, but you'll be seeing that next on the channel, and I'll leave links down below to that. If you haven't seen it, this is what mine looks like so far. I wanted to run those Sunny Sky motors, but there was a problem. And we'll get to that when we get to this video. But for the CS3, good fun. Check it out. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.